All right, Dr. Andrew Grecki here, and I want to tell you about a conversation I had about 8 months ago with the practice owner. I'll just call him Mike. Mike had heard about RTM, right? We had a call. He was interested. Um, and then he took 3 months to decide, right? 3 months. A few email follow ups, a few phone calls, not because he had objections he couldn't get past, but just because life, right? Life got busy, there's other priorities. And when he finally got started, the first thing he said to me was, I really wish I would have done this sooner, right? And that story has repeated itself more times than I can count over the past 3 years since I've been doing this. And so today I want to share, I guess I want to share with you what that delay actually costs. Not to guilt anyone, but because I think there's a pattern here that's 100% worth understanding, right? And I'd love to share my experiences so you can be more successful with this because we need to do this as a profession. This is something very, very important. So here's how it actually goes. A practice owner hears about RTM, they're intrigued, they book a call, they like what they hear, then they say one of a few things. And again, I do this about 15 to 20 times a week. Let me think about it. I need to talk to my partner. We're in the middle of hiring or an EMR transition or whatever it is. Let's revisit this after the new year or in a few months. And all those things are real things, and I get that. They're not excuses. I'm not trying to, point fingers or whatever. I've been there too. I do that all the time. But they're the genuine texture, we'll call it, right, of running a practice, which I've done for 16 years. But 3 months later, the owner is still saying the same things, right? The hiring situation has evolved into a new situation. It's probably worse if you're doing this now and this time. The new year came and went. The timing is still, not quite right. So what I've noticed is that there's rarely a moment when the timing, feels perfectly right. It's kind of like having kids. There's always something, right? And I think that's the nature of practice ownership or business ownership. So really the question is whether, not right now eventually becomes, I wish I had started sooner. And I don't think you want to be in that group. That group, that's like a regret, I think. And so, but I want to be careful, right? I want to be careful here because I don't want this to sound like a pressure tactic. It's really not. But I think it's honest to say there is a real cost to waiting, right? Not like a manufactured urgency cost. Like there actually is a real cost. You can't go back in time and capture what you lost. Every month of practice isn't running RTM is a month that the between visit work, isn't happening, right, without reimbursement. Like, again, you're doing this work already. You're making the phone calls and the text messages and the emails. You're just not getting reimbursed for it. You're making the home programs. You're doing the check-ins, the questions, the exercise guidance. All that is occurring, right? It's just not being captured in a software like ours does for you automatically. So practice owners who started 2 years ago, they have RTM. They built RTM in the rhythm of how their clinic operates. It's not new anymore. It's just how they run. That's how my practice runs. It's not a question of whether we're going to do it with the patient. It's part of our plan of care. The practices that are still evaluating, they're starting from zero when they eventually launch. Now, while other practices are operating with 2 years of refined systems, trained staff, and an established, I guess, patient expectations of what that's going to be like, maybe more importantly, your provider expectations. And that compounding gap is real. It's not dramatic. It's just it's just reality, And so the story that I hear most often from practice owners who delayed, it really goes, something like, I kept thinking there was going to be some clarity that would make the decision obvious, right? And then maybe I realized like the clarity was never going to come until I just jumped in. I just had to make that decision. Another owner told me last week, actually, he told me that he spent months searching for RTM vendors, months, spreadsheets, demo calls, comparisons of features and pricing, and at the end of it, he said, I knew in the first 2 weeks, what I was probably going to do. Right. But I just kept finding new things, new reasons to research, so I didn't really actually have to commit, right? Um, and that's not unique to RTM. I think I've done that a lot of times, right? I think it's a pattern a lot of us have with decision making. Um, we're not all quick starters, right? The decisions, especially with they feel like there's high stakes, right? The thing I want to offer here is not as a salesperson, but as a fellow practice owner, physical therapist, provider who's lived through this for now going on the fourth year, is generally RTM is generally low risk. It's performance based pricing, right? You don't pay unless insurance pays you, meaning there's no equipment. There's no equipment to invest in. There's no upfront cost. There's no implementation. It's measured in weeks, not months, right? The actual risk of trying it is very low, and the cost of indefinite delay is real. I'm making about this month $42,000 in revenue just from RTM in my practice. Imagine losing that 3 or 4 months in a row. It adds up pretty quickly. If you recognize yourself in any of this, right? If you've been thinking about it for a while, I'm not here to push you, but I would ask you, what would actually need to be true for you to feel ready, right? If the answer is I need to know how it works for practices like mine, perfect. We have case studies, we have data, we have testimonials. For practices with 3 therapists to 120 therapists, health systems, skilled nursing, pediatrics, pelvic floor. So if the answer is I need to know my staff could handle it, I can tell you right now our model doesn't require additional work from your team, right? If you want us to do it for you. If the answer is I need to know how compliance is solid, right? Well, we've been through audits. We can show you exactly what we do. We train the auditors, right? And so if after answering all your questions, there's still, something that's there that doesn't feel right, that's absolutely worth listening to. RTM isn't the right fit for everyone. I get that. But if the answer is, what would need to be true is essentially nothing you can point to, that might be worth just sitting with. That's fine. But here to talk if you want to. Thanks for listening.